Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The reflection staring back at Roy Moore from his bathroom mirror looked tired. 30 years old today, and the lines around his eyes were already settling in for the long haul. He adjusted his navy button-down shirt and straightened his collar, movements precise as always. The house smelled of garlic and rosemary. 4 hours of cooking for a dinner party that should have started 20 minutes ago. Roy checked his watch. 7:20 p.m. He'd said 7 o'clock sharp in the invitation. His phone sat silent on the marble countertop. No messages, no calls, no apologies for tardiness. He opened it and pulled up the group chat he'd created 3 weeks ago. Join us for dinner to celebrate Roy's 30th. Nothing fancy. Just good food and better company. RSVP appreciated. 6 people invited. 6 read receipts. 0 responses. Roy pocketed his phone and walked through the Craftsman home he'd restored with his own hands. Polished hardwood floors gleamed beneath recessed lighting. The dining table, a wedding gift from his grandfather, was set for 7 with the good plates, cloth napkins, and real silverware. Candles burned in the center, wax slowly pooling. The pasta had gone cold 20 minutes ago. His wife Marley's chair remained empty. Like the other 5, she hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't bothered. Roy pulled out his phone again and dialed her number. It rang 4 times before switching to voicemail. "Hey, it's Marley. Can't come to the phone right now, but leave something interesting and maybe I'll call back." The beep sounded. Roy swallowed. "Hey, dinner's ready. Everyone was supposed to be here at 7. Just wondering where you are." He hung up and stared at the empty chairs. Theo should have been sitting there, his best friend since college. And Amara, their neighbor who was always so quick with a smile when she saw him working in the yard. The others were Marley's friends mostly, but they'd seemed genuine when they said they'd love to celebrate with him. Roy sat alone at the head of the table. He served himself a plate of cold pasta, poured a glass of the expensive Cabernet he'd bought specially, and raised it in a silent toast to no one. The phone stayed silent as he mechanically worked through his meal. The candles burned lower. After dinner, Roy cleared every plate from the table. He corked the barely touched wine bottle and put away the untouched salad. He blew out the candles and turned off the special playlist he'd created in the soft glow of the kitchen light. He opened his phone one last time. The group chat sat there, mocking him with its 6 red receipts. The last one was from Marley, 3 days ago. Roy deleted the chat. Then he poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and sat in darkness. That a week passed without mention of the birthday dinner. Marley had finally come home near midnight, mumbling something about drinks with friends that had run late. She'd been avoiding his eyes ever since, staying out late or locked in her home office working. Roy was at his desk at the architecture firm when his phone buzzed with a notification. A new group message. He opened it, expecting a client update. Instead, he found himself added to a chat with 15 others, including Marley. At the top was a gaudy digital invitation featuring a photo of a young man with carefully tousled hair and a practiced smile, the new social media consultant at Marley's marketing firm. The message below made Roy's stomach turn. Lover's 23rd birthday bash rooftop dinner, champagne cruise, $1,800 per person. Venmo me. No gifts. No context. No personal message. Just a bill from his wife for another man's birthday. Roy stared at the screen until it went dark. Then he checked the time. 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. Marley should be in meetings. He dialed anyway, straight to voicemail. That he scrolled through the names in the group. Theo was there. So was Amara. All the people who hadn't bothered to show up for his birthday were apparently ready to drop nearly $2,000 for Lyles. Roy set the phone down and rubbed his temples. The architecture plans on his monitor, a sustainable community center he'd been designing for months, suddenly seemed insignificant. At T5:30, he packed up and drove home. The house was empty, as expected. He opened the Venmo app on his phone and found Marley's request waiting. $1,800 for Lyle's birthday extravaganza. Roy transferred exactly $1 with a single-word note. Congratulations. Then he drove to the hardware store. 20 minutes later, he returned with a new set of locks and the tools needed to install them. By 8 p.m., every exterior door had been fitted with new deadbolts. He slept in the guest room that night. Phone off, the new key on the nightstand beside him. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting line shadows across Roy's face as he methodically packed Marley's things into cardboard boxes. Each item told its own story: the dresses he'd complimented, jewelry he'd gifted, books they'd discussed. 5 years of marriage reduced to 16 boxes. He labeled each one with precise block letters: clothes, shoes, toiletries, office. When he found her wedding ring in a jewelry dish by the sink, he placed it in an envelope marked simply M and set it on top of the largest box. The doorbell rang at 7:48 p.m. Roy was sitting in the living room, nursing a glass of water, surrounded by neatly stacked boxes. Through the front window, he could see Marley's silhouette on the porch, swaying slightly. She wasn't alone. Roy opened the door but remained in the threshold. Marley's lipstick was smudged, her eyes glassy with alcohol. Beside her stood Lyle, one arm draped possessively around her waist. His shirt was unbuttoned low enough to display an elaborate chest tattoo. "You changed the locks." Marley's voice was pitched higher than normal, incredulous rather than apologetic. Roy didn't answer. He simply turned and gestured to the boxes arranged in the entryway. Marley squinted at them, then let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Is this some kind of joke? Let me in, Roy. It's my house, too." "Not anymore." Roy's voice was even, controlled, while stepped forward, puffing up his chest. He smelled of expensive cologne and cheap tequila. "Listen, man, don't be a boring cuck about this. Just let us in, and we can all talk like adults." Roy looked at the man-boy, really without expression. Then he turned his back on both of them, walked to the porch railing, and pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. He hadn't smoked since college, but he bought these on impulse that afternoon. "Your things are packed," Roy said, lighting the cigarette with steady hands. "Take them tonight, or I donate them tomorrow." Behind him, Marley's laughter died. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" Roy didn't turn around. "I don't care. This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "Half of everything is mine. The house, the accounts. I built this house," Roy corrected, exhaling smoke into the cool evening air. "My name's on the deed. As for the accounts..." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Yes, I'd like to close our joint account. Immediately." He provided the necessary verification information while Marley and Lyle stared. When he hung up, the silence on the porch was absolute. "You have 30 minutes to get your boxes," Roy said, still not looking at either of them. "After that, I call the police and report trespassers. You're going to regret this." Marley hissed, all pretense of drunken amusement gone. "You think anyone's going to want you after this?" Boring, uptight Roy Moore with his perfect little house and his perfect little plans. Roy took another drag from his cigarette. 29 minutes. Behind him, he heard Lyle mutter something, followed by the sound of a box being dragged across the porch. Then another. Marley's stream of curses and threats continued as they loaded her things into Lyle's ridiculously oversized SUV. Roy didn't turn around once. He just smoked and watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Two sharp knocks on the front door pulled Roy from his work. He'd converted the dining room into a temporary drafting space. Blueprints spread across the table that had held his birthday dinner 2 weeks earlier. The community center design was nearly complete, ahead of schedule. Roy opened the door to find 2 police officers on his porch: a stocky older man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman with alert eyes that scanned past him into the house. "Roy Moore?" the male officer asked, hand resting casually near his belt. "Yes." Roy kept his voice neutral. "Is there a problem?" The female officer stepped forward. "We received a missing person report filed on your behalf. May we come in?" Roy considered this for a moment, then stepped aside. "Of course. Would either of you like coffee? I just made a fresh pot." The officers exchanged glances as they entered, clearly thrown by his calm demeanor. "No, thank you," the woman said. "Sir, can you confirm your identity with some form of ID?" Roy nodded, retrieved his wallet from the kitchen counter, and presented his driver's license. "May I ask who reported me missing?" The male officer examined the ID. "Your wife, Marley Moore." She claims she hasn't been able to reach you for several days and is concerned for your safety. Roy accepted his license back. As you can see, I'm perfectly fine. Marley and I are no longer together. She's aware of this, considering she removed her belongings from this house 12 days ago. She mentioned a concerning change in behavior. The female officer said, still scanning the house. Said you changed the locks and emptied joint accounts without warning. I secured my property after discovering infidelity, Roy replied evenly. I closed accounts that were in my name, which I opened before our marriage. Everything I've done is legal. The male officer shifted uncomfortably. Well, you're clearly not missing. We'll need to update the report. I appreciate that. Roy walked them back to the door. For your records, I'll be filing a cease and desist against Marley Moore for filing false reports. If you're called here again on similar pretenses, please reference that. After they left, Roy made a single phone call to the lawyer he'd already retained. The cease and desist was drafted, approved, and delivered by courier before dinner. That night, Roy slept in his own bed for the first time since changing the locks. The sheets still smelled faintly of Marley's perfume. He stripped them off and replaced them with fresh ones, then opened the window to let the night air cleanse the room. The wine bar sat on a quiet corner in southeast Portland, its exterior unassuming except for a small sign reading vignette in simple script. Roy hesitated before pushing open the door. It had been nearly 2 years since he'd spoken to his sister Briar. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood tables, and soft lighting from iron fixtures. A few early evening patrons sipped from generous glasses, engaged in hushed conversations. Behind the polished bar stood a woman with Roy's same jawline and dark hair, though hers was cropped short with a streak of burgundy running through it. She looked up as the door closed behind him. Recognition, surprise, then wariness crossed her face in quick succession. Well, she said, setting down the wine glass she'd been polishing. Didn't expect to see you walk through that door. Roy approached the bar. Hello, Briar. She studied him for a moment. You look like shit. Thanks. What can I get you? Or is this just a drive-by family reunion? Roy slid onto a bar stool. Got anything that pairs well with divorce? Briar's eyebrows shot up. She reached for a bottle without looking and poured a generous measure of deep red wine into a glass. Start with this. Then we'll talk. An hour later, after the early crowd had thinned and Briar's assistant manager had taken over the bar, they sat in a back booth with a cheese plate between them. So she just didn't show up to your birthday dinner? Any of them? Briar asked, slicing a piece of aged Gouda. Roy nodded. Then a week later, asked me to pay $1,800 for her boyfriend's party. Jesus. Briar shook her head. I always said Marley was a social climber, but even I didn't see this coming. There's more. Roy took a sip of his second glass. I've been getting calls. Theo, my former best friend, left a voicemail asking if I was doing okay and saying that everyone's really worried. He was on the birthday invitation list. Never responded, but apparently had $1,800 for Lyle. Briar's eyes narrowed. What exactly did he say? Everyone's worried? Yeah. Then yesterday my boss called me in. Said he'd heard concerning things about my home situation and wanted to make sure I was stable enough for client meetings. She's poisoning the well, Briar muttered. Classic move. Roy looked up. What do you mean? She's telling people you're unstable. Probably saying you kicked her out, that you're having some kind of breakdown. Briar leaned forward. Marley always curated her image carefully. You threatened that when you cut her off. How do you know this? Briar's laugh was bitter. Because she did the same thing to me when I called her out 2 years ago. Remember that misunderstanding that led to our falling out? There was no misunderstanding. I caught her in a lie, and suddenly mutual friends were asking if I was doing okay, saying they'd heard I was struggling with substance abuse. Roy sat back, processing this. That's why you stopped coming around. That, and the fact that you believed her over me. Briar's words carried no accusation, just stated fact. Roy rubbed his face. I'm sorry. Ancient history. Briar waved it away. The question is, what are you going to do now? I don't know. I've been focused on securing the house, legally protecting myself. Briar pulled out her phone. Let me show you something. She navigated to a social media page and handed it to her. OY.IT was Marley's profile. The most recent post showed her looking tearful but composed, wearing minimal makeup. The caption read, "Navigating difficult transitions with grace. Thank you to everyone who's reached out with support. Sometimes the people we think we know best turn out to be strangers. Hashtag healing, hashtag new beginnings." The comments below were full of vague support and concerned questions. Roy scrolled further and found another post from 3 days earlier. A sunset photo with the caption, "When one door closes violently, another opens with possibility. Trust your instincts, ladies. Hashtag trust your gut, hashtag safety first. She's building a narrative," Breyer said quietly. And the subtext is pretty clear. Roy handed the phone back, his mouth a hard line. "She's implying I was abusive." Bingo. Breyer took a long sip of wine. And knowing Marley, this is just the public-facing part. Who knows what she's saying in private messages? Roy's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it to find a text from a number he didn't recognize. "I heard what happened. If you need someone to talk to or a place to cool down, I'm here." Violence is never the answer, Roy. He showed it to Breyer. "Who's that from?" she asked. "No idea, but apparently I'm violent now." Roy set the phone down with controlled precision. "This isn't just hurt feelings or revenge for the account. She's systematically destroying my reputation." Breyer nodded, and building herself a safety net in the process. Sympathy, support, maybe even financial help from concerned friends. Roy thought for a moment. We need to find out exactly what she's saying and to whom. I need to get ahead of this. We? Breyer raised an eyebrow. Yes, we. Roy met his sister's gaze directly. "I should have believed you 2 years ago. I'm asking for your help now. Please." A slow smile spread across Breyer's face. "Well, big brother, it just so happens that bartenders hear everything. And I've got a pretty good network of my own. Let's get to work." Over the next 3 days, Roy and Breyer pieced together the extent of Marley's campaign. Theo, Roy's former best friend, had not only attended the $1,800 party, but had been quietly dating one of Marley's friends for months, information he'd never shared with Roy. Amara, their neighbor who used to bring over cookies and chat with Roy while he worked in the yard, was now telling people in the neighborhood that she'd always sensed something off about him and had once seen him lose his temper in a frightening way. Most disturbing was what Breyer discovered through a former employee who now worked at Marley's marketing firm. Marley was preparing to launch a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Escaping My Dangerous Husband." Roy sat at Breyer's kitchen table, staring at the screenshot his sister had just shown him. The draft page featured a filtered photo of Marley looking vulnerable, with text describing how she was starting over after 5 years of increasing control and isolation. "This crosses a line," Roy said, his voice deadly quiet. "Lying to friends is one thing. But a public fundraiser based on complete fabrications. She hasn't published it yet," Breyer pointed out. "But she's shown it to several people at work, getting feedback on the wording." Roy took a photo of the screenshot with his own phone. "She wants money and social validation, and to punish me for cutting her off. So what are you going to do?" Roy was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but resolute. "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. And then I'm going to take it all away." The Portland rain beat a steady rhythm on the coffee shop windows as Roy hunched over his laptop. He'd chosen this particular cafe because it was in a neighborhood Marley never visited, too gritty for her carefully curated aesthetic. He took another sip of black coffee and reviewed the website once more. The landing page for Everlight Community Development featured sleek, minimalist design with earthy tones and sustainability buzzwords strategically placed throughout. The mission statement spoke of revolutionary community-centered housing and eco-conscious urban renewal through collective investment. It was exactly the kind of venture that would appeal to Marley's new persona as a socially conscious influencer recovering from trauma. "This looks legitimate," Breyer said, leaning over his shoulder. "Almost had me convinced. That's the idea." Roy clicked through to the investment prospectus. Every detail is tailored to appeal to Marley and her circle. Exclusive early investor opportunity. Social media promotion for founding members. Even the color scheme matches the aesthetic she's been using in her recent posts. How are you going to get it in front of her? She's blocked you everywhere. Roy closed the laptop. I'm not. You're indirectly. Remember Vivian from your wine supplier? The one whose brother works with Marley? Already done. Briar sat back with a satisfied smile. I sent her the link yesterday, told her it seemed like an amazing opportunity for socially conscious investors. She said her brother's been looking for something exactly like this. Perfect. Now we wait. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Briar burst into Roy's home office waving her phone. She took the bait. Look, on the screen was a social media post from Marley. She stood before a living wall of plants, wearing a cream-colored linen outfit that probably cost a month's rent for most people. The caption read, "Excited to announce my involvement with that Everlight community as an early-stage investor. Sustainable housing is the future, and I'm proud to put my resources behind projects that align with my values. Hashtag eco-investor, hashtag sustainable futures, hashtag women in real estate." Roy nodded slowly. Phase 1 complete. Let's move to Phase 2. Over the next 2 weeks, Roy executed his plan with methodical precision. The Everlight website added more content, including profiles of the founding team, stock photos with fictional biographies, and testimonials from early adopters, more fabrications. A basic investment portal allowed select individuals to transfer funds into a secure escrow account that Roy had established through a series of legal but deliberately complex corporate structures that Briar's network reported that Marley was talking about Everlight constantly, positioning herself as an insider with special access. She convinced at least 3 friends to invest smaller amounts after she made her initial contribution. Then on a rainy Tuesday evening, Roy received the notification he'd been waiting for, a transfer of $20,000 from Marley Moore to the Everlight escrow account. It represented nearly all the money she'd managed to siphon from their joint accounts before he closed them, plus what she'd likely raised through private sympathy donations. Roy sent a single text to Briar. It's done. The next morning, the Everlight website disappeared. The social media accounts vanished. The phone number on the business cards Marley had been handing out was disconnected. The escrow account transferred its contents to a legitimate housing charity, minus Marley's contribution, which went to a separate account Roy had established, and then closed. Everlight Community Development ceased to exist as quickly and completely as if it had never been real at all. Mr. Moore? Inez Ketterman. Thanks for meeting me. The woman who slid into the booth across from Roy was not what he expected. From her reputation as Portland's most razor-sharp independent journalist, he'd pictured someone older, harder-edged. Instead, Inez appeared to be in her early 30s, with bright purple hair cut in a sharp bob and thick-framed glasses that magnified her intelligent eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to hear me out," Roy replied, pushing a coffee across the table. "Your email was intriguing," Inez said, accepting the drink. "You claim to have evidence of a social media personality engaging in multiple fraudulent activities, including a fake abuse narrative and investment scam. That's quite an accusation." Roy placed a sealed envelope on the table. "It's all in there. Names, dates, screenshots, financial records. Everything you need to verify independently." Inez didn't touch the envelope. "Before I look at this, I need to understand your connection to the story. What's your stake?" "I'm her husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband." "Ah." Inez leaned back. "So this is revenge?" "No," Roy said evenly. "This is the truth. Verify everything in that envelope. If any of it doesn't check out, don't publish a word." Inez studied him for a long moment, then took the envelope and opened it. She spent several minutes reviewing its contents, her expression giving nothing away. "The GoFundMe draft is particularly problematic," she finally said. "And these text exchanges with friends spreading misinformation about abuse." She looked up. "If this is all accurate, she's done some real damage. Not just to me," Roy pointed out, "to actual victims of domestic violence whose experiences get questioned because of false narratives like hers." Inez nodded slowly. "I'll need to verify all of this. Talk to some of these people independently. It will take time. I understand. If I publish this, she'll know it came from you." Roy shrugged. "I'm not hiding." "One last question." Inez tapped the section about Everlight. Did you create a fake investment opportunity to trick her into losing money? I created a demonstration of how easily someone can be manipulated when they're greedy and careless, Roy corrected. Every dollar she invested has been donated to actual housing charities. I have the receipts in there, except her contribution. That's being held in escrow pending our divorce settlement. Also documented. Inez packed the materials back into the envelope. I'll be in touch, Mr. Moore. 1 week later, Inez's article went live on her popular blog, then was quickly picked up by several larger outlets. The headline was simple but devastating. The Instagram wife who faked it all. How social media enables modern grifters. The piece methodically laid out the timeline. Marley's gradual construction of a false narrative about her marriage, the manipulation of friends and followers, the fake GoFundMe that was discovered before it launched, and her eager investment in a non-existent company. Inez had done her homework, including interviews with former friends of Marley's who confirmed the deception. Most damning were the screenshots of text exchanges where Marley explicitly strategized about how to play the victim for maximum sympathy and financial support. BY evening, Marley had made her social media account private, but it was too late. The story had gone viral, picked up by influencer watchdog accounts and commentary channels. Her carefully constructed image was unraveling in real dash time. 11:42 p.m. Roy's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number and knew one, but he knew immediately who it was from. You think you're so clever. You've ruined everything. I hope you're satisfied. Roy thought for a moment, then typed his response. I gave you everything. All you gave me was a bill. Now you know the cost. He blocked the number before she could reply. 6 months later, Roy stood on the front porch of his Craftsman home, watching the painters put the finishing touches on the new exterior. The warm gray with white trim and deep red door transformed the house, erasing the last visual reminders of the life he'd shared with Marley. Looks good, Breyer said, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. The sign came this morning, by the way. Roy accepted the coffee. Perfect timing. The LLC paperwork was finalized yesterday. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier. Despite Marley's attempts to claim half the house, Roy's documentation of its purchase and renovation using his premarital funds had protected his ownership. The judge had been particularly unimpressed by Marley's credibility after the expose. Breyer had moved into the guest house 2 weeks ago after selling her apartment. Together, they developed a business plan to convert the property into a small wine tasting venue and art gallery, using Breyer's industry connections and Roy's architectural expertise. Have you heard anything about her lately? Breyer asked casually. Roy shook his head. Not directly. Theo tried to reach out last month, some half-assed apology about misunderstandings. I didn't respond. I heard she's in Los Angeles now, trying to rebuild her influencer brand with apology videos no one's watching. Not my problem. Roy sipped his coffee, watching as the painters began packing up their equipment. That evening, after the painters had gone and Breyer had left for a supplier meeting, Roy sat alone in the backyard. He'd built a small fire in the pit, and the flames cast dancing shadows across the newly landscaped garden. His phone sat on the arm of his chair. Almost without conscious thought, he opened it and navigated to Lyle's TikTok account, still public, though inactive since the scandal broke. The last post was a defensive rant about being misled that had garnered mostly mocking comments. Roy closed the app and tossed another log onto the fire. The flames leapt higher, illuminating the space he'd created for himself, clean, orderly, precisely as he wanted it. Inside, the house had been completely redesigned. The master bedroom was now his private architecture studio. The dining room, where he'd sat alone on his birthday, was now a gallery space for local artists. Every trace of Marley, from the color schemes she'd chosen to the furniture she'd insisted on, was gone. Roy watched the fire burn until it was nothing but embers. Then he went inside, locked the door behind him, and slept soundly through the night. In the months that followed, Roy and Breyer's venture, now named Craftsman Gallery and Wine, became a modest success in the neighborhood. Roy continued his work at the architecture firm, focusing especially on sustainable community projects. He showed no interest in dating, despite occasional interest from gallery patrons or clients. He'd built a new routine: work, Home, dinner with Briar and her rescue dog. Evenings in the garage workshop building custom furniture pieces that sold in the gallery. Marley's attempts to sue for defamation failed spectacularly when her own documented deceptions were presented in court. Her final public attempt to engage with Roy, a tearful video titled My Side of the Story that twisted events beyond recognition, was met with such overwhelming criticism that she finally retreated from public view. Roy never spoke her name again. Not because the wound was still raw, but because he had won so completely that she had become irrelevant. He had given her a bill, and she had paid it in full.